They say justice is blind, but sometimes it needs to open its eyes. What you're about to hear is a story that will challenge everything you think you know about power, prejudice, and the dangerous game of assumptions. It's about a traffic stop that went viral, a lie that unraveled under oath, and a revelation that left an entire courtroom speechless. This is the story of Officer Marcus Bradley, a man who thought his badge made him untouchable, and Dr. Samantha, Sam, Washington, a woman whose quiet strength concealed secrets that would shake the very foundations of Bradley's world. By the end of this hour, you'll understand why appearances can be the most dangerous deception of all, and why karma has a way of finding those who abuse their power. But first, let me take you back to where it all began. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell us, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love hearing from our global family. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep this storytelling journey alive. Your support truly keeps us going. Now sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for a story that will stay with you long after it ends. To understand this story, you need to know the players. Let's start with Officer Marcus Bradley, badge number 4471, 12-year veteran of the Metro City Police Department. Bradley grew up in a working-class family where respect was earned through authority. His father was a security guard who preached about knowing your place and reading people right. Marcus learned early that power came from the uniform, and once you had it, you never let anyone forget it. At 34, Bradley had what he considered a perfect record, no major complaints, solid arrest numbers, and the respect of his fellow officers. But dig deeper, and you'd find a pattern. Traffic stops in affluent neighborhoods that lasted minutes. Stops in other areas that stretched into interrogations. Bradley had mastered the art of selective enforcement, always staying just within departmental guidelines. He drove his patrol route like a king surveying his kingdom, especially through the Riverside District, a gentrifying area where old money met new development. Bradley saw himself as the guardian of order, the thin blue line between civilization and chaos. Now, let me tell you about Dr. Samantha Washington. At 28, Sam looked like she could be anyone's little sister. 5'4" with natural hair usually pulled back in a simple ponytail, she preferred jeans and sneakers over designer clothes. When she smiled, which was often, she looked like a college student, not someone who commanded one of the most elite military units in the world. But Sam's story reads like something from an action movie. Raised by her grandmother in Detroit after her parents died in a car accident, she learned discipline and determination before she learned to drive. Straight A's led to a full scholarship to MIT, where she studied aerospace engineering while secretly dreaming of something bigger. At 19, she shocked everyone by enlisting in the Navy. Not the typical path for an MIT graduate, but Sam had always been drawn to challenges others couldn't imagine. What happened next was extraordinary, even by military standards. Sam didn't just join the Navy, she conquered it. Top of her class in Officer Candidate School. Distinguished graduate from Naval Flight School. Then came the selection that changed everything, Navy SEALs. The process nearly broke her. Hell Week, dive training, parachute school, combat tactics, each phase designed to eliminate candidates. Of the 180 who started, only 12 graduated. Sam was the only woman. But her real test came in classified operations across 3 continents. Hostage rescues in Somalia. Counterterrorism in Southeast Asia. Deep reconnaissance missions that never made the news. In 7 years of active duty, Lieutenant Commander Washington earned more commendations than most officers see in entire careers. Yet looking at her now, driving her modest Honda Civic through Riverside District on a quiet Tuesday evening, you'd never guess. She wore no military insignia, carried no visible signs of her extraordinary life. Sam had learned that true strength didn't need to announce itself. She was heading home from her civilian job, working as a trauma surgeon at Metro General Hospital, where she saved lives with the same precision she'd once used in combat zones. Another secret skill hidden behind her ordinary appearance. 2 worlds were about to collide in ways neither could have imagined. March 15, 7:43 p.m. The evening rush had died down, leaving Riverside District's tree-lined streets quiet except for the occasional dog walker or jogger. Sam was driving home after a 14-hour shift in the ER, exhausted but satisfied. She just saved a construction worker's life after a crane accident, another day at the trauma center that reminded her why she transitioned from military to medical service. Her Honda Civic was 5 years old, clean but unremarkable. The back seat held her gym bag and a stack of medical journals. NPR played softly on the radio, discussing healthcare policy. Sam drove exactly the speed limit, hands at 10 and 2, habits ingrained from years of military discipline. 3 blocks away, Officer Bradley was finishing what he'd later describe as a routine patrol. But routine for Bradley meant something specific. He positioned himself at the corner of Riverside and Oak, a spot where the neighborhood demographics shifted. Old money mansions on one side, apartment complexes on the other. Bradley had learned to read the geography of class and race, and he patrolled accordingly. He'd already made 2 stops that evening. The first, a white teenager in a BMW who'd been speeding. Bradley had approached with a smile, issued a friendly warning, and sent him on his way in under 3 minutes. The second, an Hispanic man in a work truck who'd allegedly failed to signal. That stop took 25 minutes, included a vehicle search, and ended with a citation for expired registration. Bradley called it community policing. Others might call it something else. The radio crackled with dispatcher chatter about a domestic disturbance across town, but Bradley wasn't interested. He preferred traffic enforcement, cleaner, more predictable, and it gave him the control he craved over his beat. At 7:47 p.m., Sam's Honda appeared in Bradley's rearview mirror as she turned onto Riverside. Bradley watched through his side mirror, running mental calculations. Older car. Lone black woman. Driving through a neighborhood where she probably didn't belong. Bradley had made these assumptions thousands of times before, and in his mind, he was rarely wrong. People had patterns, and patterns told stories. This woman's story, he decided, was probably drugs, theft, or prostitution. Maybe all 3. He waited until she passed, then pulled up behind her, following at a distance that wouldn't appear suspicious to a dashboard camera but would give him time to observe. Sam checked her mirrors, good driving habits, but showed no signs of panic or evasion. In fact, she seemed completely relaxed, one hand on the wheel, occasionally singing along with the radio. This annoyed Bradley more than erratic driving would have. In his experience, innocent people were nervous around police. Relaxed meant hiding something. For 6 blocks, he followed, waiting for any minor infraction that would justify a stop. A rolling stop sign. Failure to signal. Expired tags. Anything. Sam provided none of these. She stopped completely at every sign, signaled every turn, maintained perfect following distance. If anything, she drove like someone with military training, which, of course, she did. But Bradley had already decided this stop was going to happen. At the intersection of Riverside and Maple, he hit his lights. The red and blue lights filled Sam's rearview mirror at 7:52 p.m. She glanced at her speedometer, 28 in a 30 zone. Checked her recent turns, all properly signaled. Scanned her dashboard, registration current, inspection up to date. Sam wasn't worried, just puzzled. In her experience, traffic stops happen for reasons. She couldn't identify one. Following protocols she'd learned in military driving courses, she immediately activated her hazard lights to acknowledge the stop, then pulled to the right side of Riverside Avenue. She chose a spot under a streetlight, beside a small park where several joggers were visible. Good visibility, public location, witnesses nearby. As she shifted into park and rolled down her window, Sam's mind automatically cataloged details. Time, 7:52 p.m. Location, 400 block of Riverside. Weather clear, good visibility. Her hands moved to the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel, where they'd remain visible. In the patrol car behind her, Bradley was running her plates through the system. The Honda came back clean, registered to Samantha Washington, no warrants, no violations. This should have ended the stop before it began, but Bradley had already committed to his assumptions. He approached her vehicle with the swagger of someone who owned the street, flashlight in hand despite the adequate lighting. His body language communicated authority and suspicion in equal measure. "Evening," Bradley said, stopping beside her driver's side window. "License and registration." "Good evening, officer," Sam replied calmly. "May I ask why you stopped me?" The question irritated Bradley immediately. In his world, citizens didn't ask questions, they complied. The fact that she spoke clearly, without fear or deference, contradicted his expectations of how this interaction should go. "License and registration," he repeated, his tone harder now. "We'll get to the why." Sam nodded and reached slowly toward her purse, narrating her movements as she'd been trained. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. My registration is in the glove compartment. Hands where I can see them," Bradley snapped, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Step out of the vehicle." This was the moment the interaction shifted from routine to concerning. Sam had done nothing to warrant removal from her vehicle, and she knew it. But she also knew that challenging a police officer during a stop could escalate dangerously. "Officer, I'm happy to provide my documents, but could you tell me what violation you observed?" "I believe I was driving legally." Bradley's jaw tightened. 20 years of conditioning told him that polite, articulate black women in this neighborhood meant one thing: educated troublemaker. Someone who might know their rights, might make his life difficult, might file complaints. "Step out of the vehicle. Now." His hand was now clearly resting on his service weapon. "This is not a request." Sam's military training kicked in: assess, adapt, survive. She was dealing with an officer who had already decided she was a threat, despite her complete compliance. Escalation served no one's interests. "I'm stepping out now," she said clearly, opening her door slowly. As she stood, Bradley got his first full look at her, young, small, wearing scrubs from the hospital. Nothing threatening about her appearance, which somehow made Bradley more suspicious, not less. "Turn around, hands on the vehicle," he ordered. "Am I under arrest?" Sam asked, complying with his instructions while keeping her voice steady. "You're being detained while I conduct my investigation." "Investigation of what crime?" The question hung in the air between them. Bradley realized he had no good answer, which made him angrier. He'd made this stop based on assumptions, and now a calm, articulate woman was politely asking him to justify what felt increasingly unjustifiable. But Bradley had crossed a line, and momentum carried him forward. In his mind, backing down now would mean admitting error, showing weakness. The badge meant never having to say you were wrong. "I'll ask the questions here," he said, beginning to pat down Sam's pockets despite having no legal justification. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "I live here," Sam replied simply. The answer surprised Bradley. His mental map of the neighborhood didn't include black professionals, and certainly not young women who drove older cars. His worldview required Sam to be an outsider, an intruder, a problem to be solved. "Where exactly?" "I'd prefer to provide that information along with my identification, which I haven't been allowed to retrieve yet." Bradley stepped back, studying her face in the streetlight. Something about her composure unnerved him. Most people were nervous, apologetic, eager to please during traffic stops. Sam seemed professional. Like she'd been in stressful situations before and knew how to handle them. This realization should have made Bradley more careful. Instead, it made him more determined to assert control. What happened next would be captured on Bradley's dashboard camera, though he seemed to have forgotten it was recording. The footage would later become crucial evidence, but in the moment, Bradley was focused only on maintaining what he saw as his authority. "I'm going to search your vehicle," he announced, walking toward the Honda's driver's side. "Do you have probable cause for a search?" Sam asked. The question was polite but informed, and it stopped Bradley in his tracks. Most people didn't know their Fourth Amendment rights, or if they did, they were too intimidated to invoke them. Sam's calm assertion of constitutional protections told Bradley he was dealing with someone who might actually know the law. "I don't need probable cause," Bradley lied smoothly. "This is a routine traffic stop, and I have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity." "What criminal activity?" Sam's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath now. She'd spent years in situations where lives depended on clear communication and proper procedures. Bradley's improvised justifications wouldn't have passed muster in any military command she'd served under. "Drug trafficking," Bradley said, the lie coming easily now. "This is a known corridor for narcotics distribution." It wasn't true. Riverside District had among the lowest crime rates in the city, which Bradley knew perfectly well. But lies told with authority often sound like truth, especially when backed by a badge and a gun. Sam stood silently for a moment, processing the situation. She was watching a police officer manufacture probable cause in real time, violating both departmental policy and constitutional law. In her military career, she'd seen what happened when people in authority positions abandoned their training and made decisions based on bias instead of facts. "Officer, I'd like to see your supervisor," she said clearly. The request hit Bradley like a slap. In 12 years of policing, he'd rarely had citizens ask for his supervisor during routine stops. It usually meant trouble, complaints, investigations, paperwork. The kind of scrutiny Bradley preferred to avoid. "My supervisor is busy," he said, moving toward her car door. "I'm conducting this stop." As Bradley reached for the door handle, Sam made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and began recording. "For both our protection, I'm documenting this interaction," she said, holding the phone where Bradley could see it. The camera's presence transformed Bradley's demeanor instantly. Recording meant accountability, and accountability meant his version of events might be questioned. In his experience, citizens who recorded police encounters were usually looking for trouble, trying to provoke incidents they could later use against officers. "Turn off the phone," Bradley ordered. "I have a legal right to record this interaction as long as I don't interfere with your duties," Sam replied. "I'm not interfering. I'm standing where you told me to stand. I've complied with all your lawful orders, and I'm simply documenting what's happening." Bradley's mind raced. He knew she was right about recording rights, but admitting that would validate her legal knowledge and undermine his authority. He was caught between following proper procedure and maintaining the control he'd established through intimidation. He chose intimidation. "You're interfering with a police investigation," Bradley said, stepping closer to her. "Turn off the phone or you'll be arrested for obstruction." "What investigation?" Sam asked. "You still haven't told me what violation you observed or what crime you suspect me of committing." The questions were reasonable, professional, and completely within her rights. They were also destroying Bradley's narrative about this being a routine stop based on suspicious behavior. By now, several of the joggers in the nearby park had stopped to watch the interaction. One was discreetly recording on his own phone. The public attention made Bradley more aggressive, not less. He felt his authority being questioned in front of an audience. "Last warning," Bradley said, his hand moving back to his weapon. "Turn off the phone." Sam looked at the hand on his gun, then back at his face. In combat zones, she'd learned to read the difference between tactical readiness and dangerous instability. Bradley was showing signs of the latter. "I'm going to continue recording," she said quietly. "But I want to be clear that I'm not resisting, I'm not fleeing, and I'm not threatening you in any way. I'm a healthcare worker heading home from my job, and I don't understand why this interaction is escalating." The mention of healthcare work should have de-escalated the situation. Instead, it infuriated Bradley further. In his mind, Sam was now claiming professional status to make him look bad, trying to position herself as a respectable citizen who didn't deserve police scrutiny. But Bradley had a trump card he'd used before in situations like this, the magic words that could justify almost any police action. "I smell marijuana coming from your vehicle," he announced loudly, clearly playing to the growing audience of witnesses. It was a complete fabrication. Sam didn't use drugs, and there were no illegal substances in her car. But Bradley knew that claiming to smell marijuana gave him legal cover to search her vehicle, detain her longer, and escalate the stop into something that looked legitimate on paper. Sam's military training had prepared her for many things, but not for dealing with a police officer who was willing to lie under oath to justify his prejudices. The real confrontation was just beginning. The marijuana claim changed everything. Bradley now had his manufactured probable cause, and Sam found herself facing a choice every Black American knows intimately: comply with illegal police conduct or resist and face potentially deadly consequences. "I'm going to search your vehicle for controlled substances," Bradley announced, moving toward the Honda with newfound confidence. The lie had given him legal cover, and he knew it. "Officer, there are no drugs in my car," Sam said firmly. "You're searching without legitimate probable cause." "I smell marijuana," Bradley repeated, now for the benefit of his dashboard camera. "That gives me probable cause to search for illegal substances." As Bradley began rifling through her car, tossing aside her medical journals and gym clothes, Sam continued recording. The footage would later show her belongings scattered across the pavement, while Bradley conducted an increasingly frantic search for evidence that didn't exist. "What's this?" Bradley asked, holding up Sam's hospital ID badge, which had been clipped to her sun visor. "My work identification. I'm a trauma surgeon at Metro General." Bradley examined the badge with suspicion, as if it might be counterfeit. The idea that the young Black woman he profiled as a potential drug dealer was actually a doctor didn't fit his narrative, so he chose to doubt the evidence rather than question his assumptions. "Anyone can get a fake ID," he muttered, tossing the badge onto the pile of her scattered belongings. By now, the crowd of witnesses had grown. Several people were recording on their phones, creating multiple angles of documentation. One of the joggers had called 911 to report what looked like police harassment, though they didn't know if anyone would respond. Bradley's search of the car yielded nothing illegal, which should have ended the detention. Instead, it made him more desperate to justify his actions. He began questioning Sam about her presence in the neighborhood, her work schedule, her living situation, fishing for any inconsistency he could use to extend the stop. "You said you live here," Bradley said, having found her vehicle registration. "This shows a P.O. Box address." "I use a P.O. Box for vehicle registration for security reasons," Sam explained patiently. "My residential address is on my driver's license, which you still haven't allowed me to retrieve." The security precaution was actually related to Sam's military service. Special operations personnel often used mail drops to protect their home addresses from foreign intelligence services. But she couldn't explain this without revealing information that might escalate the situation further. Bradley interpreted her explanation as evasiveness. In his experience, people who used P.O. boxes were usually hiding something: outstanding warrants, immigration issues, or criminal activity. "I'm going to need to verify your identity," Bradley said, though he'd already run her plates and found no issues. "I'm calling for backup to assist with this investigation." The backup call was tactical. Additional officers would make Sam feel outnumbered and might support Bradley's version of events if complaints were filed later. It also extended the detention, giving Bradley more time to find something, anything, he could use to justify the stop. As they waited for backup, Bradley continued his questioning, each query designed to make Sam appear suspicious or uncooperative. "How long have you been in this area?" "About 2 years." "What brings you through here at this time of night?" "I'm driving home from work." "You said you're a doctor?" "What kind of doctor?" "Trauma surgery." "Where did you go to medical school?" The questions were fishing expeditions, attempts to catch Sam in inconsistencies or find grounds for further detention. But Sam's answers were consistent because they were true. She really was a doctor, really did live in the neighborhood, and really was just driving home from work. This truthfulness frustrated Bradley more than lies would have. He needed Sam to be the criminal he'd imagined her to be, but reality kept contradicting his assumptions. When backup arrived 15 minutes later, it came in the form of Officer Janet Collins, a 20-year veteran who immediately recognized that something was wrong with the scene before her. A compliant citizen, no evidence of criminal activity, scattered personal belongings, and a growing crowd of witnesses recording everything. "What's the situation here, Marcus?" Collins asked quietly, approaching Bradley near his patrol car. "Traffic stop, suspected drug trafficking," Bradley replied. "Driver's been uncooperative, questioning my authority." Collins looked at Sam, who was standing calmly beside the Honda, still recording, surrounded by her scattered medical journals and hospital scrubs. The scene didn't match Bradley's description of an uncooperative drug suspect. "What violation initiated the stop?" Collins asked. Bradley hesitated. He realized he'd never actually articulated a specific traffic violation, having been focused on broader suspicions and manufactured probable cause. "Suspicious behavior," he said finally. "Driving slowly through the neighborhood, appeared to be casing houses." The explanation was thin, and Collins knew it. She'd worked with Bradley before and recognized his tendency to make stops based on hunches rather than observed violations. Usually, she tried to support fellow officers, but this situation looked problematic. "Marcus, maybe we should," Collins began. "I'm handling this," Bradley cut her off sharply. The public attention and witness recording had made him defensive and determined to prove he'd been right to make the stop. It was at this moment that Bradley made the decision that would destroy his career. He decided to double down on his lies rather than admit error. What happened next would be captured on multiple cameras and would ultimately lead to criminal charges against a police officer who thought his badge made him above the law. Standing in the harsh glare of street lights, surrounded by witnesses and cameras, Officer Bradley faced a moment of truth. He could acknowledge that he made an error, release Sam with an apology, and end the situation professionally. Or he could commit fully to the lie he'd constructed and hope his badge would protect him from the consequences. Bradley chose the lie. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for possession of controlled substances," he announced loudly, clearly speaking for the benefit of his dashboard camera. The words hit the crowd of witnesses like a physical blow. They'd watched the entire interaction. They'd seen Bradley search the car and find nothing. They knew he was making a false arrest, but they were powerless to stop it. "What controlled substances?" Sam asked, her voice still steady despite the gravity of the situation. "You searched my car and found nothing illegal. During my search, I discovered a small bag of marijuana in your vehicle," Bradley stated, pulling out his handcuffs. It was a brazen lie, and everyone present knew it. The crowd began murmuring angrily, phones recording from multiple angles. Officer Collins looked stunned. She'd watched the entire search and knew Bradley had found no drugs. "Marcus," Collins said urgently. "I don't think. I found marijuana," Bradley repeated, louder now, establishing his false narrative for the official record. "Small bag, hidden under the driver's seat." Sam looked directly into Bradley's eyes as he approached with handcuffs. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Officer Bradley," she said clearly, using his name for the first time, "I want you to understand something very important. You are about to arrest an innocent person based on false evidence. You are going to testify under oath that you found drugs in my car, and that testimony will be perjury. I'm giving you one last chance to reconsider this course of action." The formality of her warning caught Bradley off guard. Most people being arrested were emotional, angry, or afraid. Sam sounded like she was conducting a military briefing, clinical and precise. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Bradley ordered, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I need you to understand," Sam continued, still facing him, "that lying under oath is a felony. Filing false police reports is a felony. Violating someone's constitutional rights under color of law is a federal crime. You're about to commit multiple felonies because you don't want to admit you made a mistake." Bradley's hands shook slightly as he held the handcuffs. Sam's calm recitation of the laws he was breaking sounded less like the pleading of a desperate suspect and more like testimony from someone who understood the legal system intimately. "Last warning," Bradley said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Sam turned around and placed her hands behind her back. As Bradley cuffed her wrists, she spoke clearly enough for every recording device to capture her words. For the record, I am being arrested by Officer Marcus Bradley of the Metro City Police Department on false charges. He has claimed to find marijuana in my vehicle that does not exist. He is preparing to commit perjury in his police report and in any subsequent court testimony. I am cooperating fully with this illegal arrest to avoid being injured or killed, but I want it clearly documented that these charges are fabricated. The clinical precision of her statement sent chills through the crowd. This wasn't the desperate proclamation of innocence they expected from someone being arrested. It sounded like evidence being preserved for a trial. Bradley loaded Sam into the back of his patrol car, but something nagged at him. Her demeanor, her knowledge of legal procedures, her unnaturally calm response to being arrested, nothing fit his assumptions about who she was supposed to be. As he filled out his arrest report, Bradley wrote that he had observed suspicious behavior during a routine traffic stop, detected the odor of marijuana, and discovered a small bag of cannabis during a legal search of the vehicle. Each word was a lie, but lies he'd used successfully before. What Bradley didn't know was that Sam's final warning hadn't been the desperate plea of someone trying to avoid arrest. It had been the precise documentation of crimes committed against her by someone who was about to discover that appearances can be fatally deceiving. The revelation was less than an hour away, and it would destroy everything Bradley thought he knew about power, authority, and the price of judging people by their skin color rather than their character. The booking process at Metro City Jail should have been routine. One more black woman processed on drug charges, another statistic in the system. But as Sam was led through intake, several things happened that would unravel Bradley's fabricated case. First, the jail's medical screening revealed Sam's profession. When asked about medications and health conditions, she provided her medical license number and explained that as a trauma surgeon, she needed to inform the hospital of her detention to arrange coverage for her patients. The intake officer, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, paused when she heard trauma surgeon. In 15 years of processing arrests, she'd rarely encountered doctors, and never one who seemed so composed during booking. "Ma'am, did you say you're a surgeon at Metro General?" Rodriguez asked. "Yes. Dr. Samantha Washington, trauma surgery. I'll need to call the hospital to arrange patient coverage." Rodriguez looked at the arrest report Bradley had filed. Drug possession. Suspicious behavior. The disconnect between the professional woman sitting calmly in front of her and the crime alleged made her uncomfortable. But it was Sam's second phone call that changed everything. "I need to contact my commanding officer," Sam said quietly. "Your commanding officer?" Rodriguez asked, confused. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Washington, U.S. Navy. I'm required to report any legal issues to my chain of command immediately." The words hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Military officers were rare in county jail, and when they appeared, it usually meant serious complications for everyone involved. "Ma'am, are you active duty military?" "Naval Reserve, but I hold active security clearances. This arrest needs to be reported through proper channels." Rodriguez immediately called her supervisor, Lieutenant Williams, who arrived within minutes. The situation was rapidly escalating beyond a simple drug arrest. "Ma'am, what's your military occupation specialty?" Williams asked. Sam looked directly at him, and for the first time that evening, allowed a hint of steel to show in her voice. "Special operations. Navy SEALs." The silence that followed was deafening. Williams stared at the arrest report, then at Sam, then back at the report. Navy SEAL officers didn't get arrested for drug possession. They were among the most rigorously screened and disciplined personnel in the military. "Lieutenant, I need to make some phone calls," Williams said to Rodriguez. "Keep Dr. Washington in a private holding cell. Don't process her any further until I get back." Within 30 minutes, Williams' office became a crisis management center. The hospital confirmed that Dr. Washington was indeed a respected trauma surgeon with no disciplinary issues. The Navy confirmed that Lieutenant Commander Washington held multiple active security clearances and had an exemplary service record. But it was the third call that sealed Bradley's fate. Captain James Mitchell, Sam's former commanding officer in SEAL Team 3, didn't just confirm her identity, he provided context that made Williams' blood run cold. Lieutenant Commander Washington is one of the most decorated special operations officers I've ever served with, Mitchell explained. She's received the Navy Cross, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. She's saved more lives in combat than most people save in peacetime. If she's been arrested on drug charges, I guarantee you someone has made a catastrophic error. Williams hung up the phone and stared at Bradley's arrest report. A Navy SEAL officer. A trauma surgeon. A decorated combat veteran. Arrested for drug possession based on marijuana that allegedly appeared during a traffic stop with no clear violation. The implications were staggering. If Bradley had lied about finding drugs on a Navy SEAL officer, the case wouldn't just collapse. It would trigger federal investigations into civil rights violations, police misconduct, and perjury. Williams immediately called District Attorney Sarah Chen, waking her at home to explain the situation. Chen's response was immediate and decisive. Release her immediately. No charges filed. And get me everything on this arrest, dashboard cam, witness statements, everything. If that officer lied about evidence, he's looking at federal prison. As Sam was released from her holding cell at 11:47 p.m., Williams personally apologized and assured her that the department would investigate Bradley's conduct thoroughly. Sam simply nodded and asked for her belongings. "Ma'am," Williams said hesitantly, "given your background, I have to ask, did Officer Bradley actually find marijuana in your car?" Sam looked at him with the calm, direct gaze of someone who had faced enemy fire and lived to tell about it. "Lieutenant, I have held top-secret security clearances for 7 years. I have commanded special operations missions where the smallest error could cost American lives. I have never used illegal drugs, and there were no controlled substances in my vehicle. Officer Bradley committed perjury tonight, and he did it because he saw a young black woman and decided she must be a criminal." The weight of her words settled over Williams like a lead blanket. They had arrested a Navy SEAL officer based on fabricated evidence. The scandal would destroy careers and potentially land officers in federal prison. But Sam wasn't finished. "I want you to understand something, Lieutenant. Officer Bradley didn't just lie about me tonight. He lied under oath, on camera, in front of witnesses. If he's done this to me, how many other innocent people has he done it to? How many people without military rank or medical degrees have been convicted based on his false testimony?" The question hung in the air as Sam collected her belongings and walked out of the jail a free woman. But for Officer Bradley, the real consequences were just beginning. Dawn was breaking over Metro City when Officer Marcus Bradley received the call that would end his career. Lieutenant Williams' voice was cold and professional as he delivered the news. "Officer Bradley, you are to report to Internal Affairs immediately. You are suspended pending investigation of your conduct during the Washington arrest." Bradley's stomach dropped. "Sir, I followed proper procedure. I found marijuana in the suspect's vehicle. The suspect, Officer Bradley, is Lieutenant Commander Dr. Samantha Washington, United States Navy SEALs. She's a decorated war veteran and a trauma surgeon. And according to multiple witnesses and your own dashboard camera, you conducted an illegal search based on fabricated probable cause." The words hit Bradley like physical blows. Navy SEAL. Doctor. War veteran. Everything he thought he knew about the woman he'd arrested was wrong. "Sir, I report to IA immediately." "And Bradley? You might want to call a lawyer." The Internal Affairs investigation took less than a week. Dashboard camera footage showed Bradley's illegal search. Witness recordings captured his fabricated marijuana claim. The booking sergeant testified that no drugs were logged into evidence from Sam's arrest. But the evidence that destroyed Bradley's career came from an unexpected source: his own patrol car's GPS system. The data showed that Bradley had followed Sam for 6 blocks before initiating the stop, despite her driving legally. It revealed a pattern of prolonged surveillance based on no observable violation, exactly the kind of profiling the department had banned years earlier. District Attorney Chin filed charges against Bradley within 10 days: perjury, filing false police reports, violation of civil rights under color of law, and official misconduct. Each charge carried potential prison time. The story hit national news when Sam's military record was revealed. Navy SEAL officer arrested on false drug charges. Became a viral story that sparked conversations about racial profiling, police accountability, and the assumptions people make based on appearance. But Sam herself remained largely out of the spotlight. She returned to work at Metro General, continued her Naval Reserve duties, and declined most interview requests. When she did speak publicly, it was with the same measured professionalism she'd shown during her arrest. "This isn't about me," she told CNN in her only major interview. "This is about a system that allows officers to make assumptions based on race and appearance, then lie to cover up their mistakes." Officer Bradley didn't see a doctor or a Navy officer that night. He saw a young black woman and decided she must be a criminal. That's the real crime here. The interview went viral, not because of what Sam said, but because of how she said it. No anger, no calls for revenge, just a clear-eyed analysis of systemic prejudice delivered with the precision of someone trained to brief military commanders. Bradley's trial began 6 months later. The prosecution's case was overwhelming: dashboard camera footage, witness testimony, GPS data, and Bradley's own false police report. But it was Sam's testimony that sealed his conviction. Taking the stand in her Navy dress uniform, rows of ribbons across her chest, Sam recounted the night's events with clinical precision. She didn't dramatize or embellish. She simply told the truth in a way that made Bradley's lies impossible to defend. "Officer Bradley told me he smelled marijuana," Sam testified. "When I asked him to show me the marijuana he claimed to find, he couldn't produce it because it never existed. He arrested me based on evidence he knew was false." Bradley's defense attorney tried to argue that his client had made an honest mistake, but the evidence was too clear. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Bradley to 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation. But her words during sentencing captured the real impact of his crimes. "Officer Bradley, you didn't just lie about evidence. You betrayed the public trust, violated your oath, and perpetuated the exact kind of racial bias that destroys police-community relations. Dr. Washington served her country with honor in some of the most dangerous places on earth, then came home to serve her community as a trauma surgeon. You repaid that service by treating her like a criminal based solely on the color of her skin." The Metro City Police Department implemented sweeping reforms in response to the scandal. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers. Dashboard camera footage was automatically reviewed for any arrest involving drug possession. And officers received additional training on constitutional rights and implicit bias. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The Bradley case became a teaching moment in police academies across the country, a stark reminder that assumptions based on appearance can destroy careers, violate rights, and undermine the very foundations of justice. 6 months after Bradley's conviction, Sam was promoted to Chief of Trauma Surgery at Metro General. She also received a commendation from the Secretary of the Navy for her exemplary conduct under adversity during the arrest. In her acceptance speech, Sam returned to the theme that had defined her response to the entire ordeal. "We all make assumptions about people based on what we see. The difference is whether we act on those assumptions or whether we take the time to learn who people really are. Officer Bradley saw a young black woman and assumed she was a criminal. He never bothered to discover that she was a doctor, a Navy officer, or simply a human being deserving of dignity and respect." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd of medical professionals, military personnel, and community leaders. "But this story isn't really about me. It's about everyone who's been profiled, searched, arrested, or worse based on assumptions rather than evidence. It's about the teenager who gets stopped for driving while black. It's about the businessman who gets followed in stores. It's about the professor who gets questioned about belonging in her own classroom. My uniform and my degrees gave me protection that others don't have. The real work is ensuring that everyone, regardless of their profession or achievements, is treated with the dignity and respect that should be every person's birthright. Today, Officer Marcus Bradley is inmate number 47291 at Millfield Correctional Facility. He's eligible for parole in 18 months, but his law enforcement career is over forever. The conviction means he can never again carry a badge, a gun, or the authority he once wielded so carelessly. Dr. Lieutenant Commander Samantha Washington continues her dual service as a trauma surgeon and Naval Reserve officer. She's saved countless lives in both roles, though she rarely talks about either her military service or the night that made her famous. The Honda Civic she was driving that night sits in her garage, a reminder of how quickly life can change when someone decides to judge you by your appearance rather than your character. Sometimes she thinks about that moment, when Bradley first turned on his lights, and how different things might have been if he'd simply checked her registration and sent her on her way with a friendly wave. But then she remembers the dozens of emails she receives each week from people sharing their own stories of being profiled, searched, or arrested based on assumptions. She realizes that her arrest, traumatic as it was, became a catalyst for conversations that needed to happen. The lesson of that March evening isn't complicated. Appearances deceive, assumptions destroy, and the price of prejudice is always higher than the cost of treating people with dignity. Officer Bradley learned that lesson in the most painful way possible, by losing his freedom, his career, and his reputation because he couldn't see past the color of someone's skin. Sam Washington learned it too, though she'd suspected it long before that night. She learned that no amount of education, achievement, or service can completely protect you from prejudice. But she also learned that how you respond to injustice defines who you are far more than the injustice itself. In the end, the story of Officer Bradley and Dr. Washington isn't just about a traffic stop gone wrong. It's about the choices we make when we encounter people who don't fit our assumptions. It's about the courage required to admit when we're wrong and the wisdom to understand that everyone deserves to be judged by their actions, not their appearance. The badge didn't make Officer Bradley right. The uniform didn't make Dr. Washington a criminal. But the truth, captured on camera, witnessed by citizens, and tested in a court of law, revealed what both of them really were: a man who let prejudice destroy his career, and a woman whose grace under pressure revealed the kind of character that can't be assumed, only earned. The next time you see someone and start making assumptions about who they are or what they represent, remember Lieutenant Commander Dr. Samantha Washington. Remember that the person you're looking at might be the one who saves your life in an emergency room, or the one who risked everything to keep you safe in a foreign war zone. And remember Officer Marcus Bradley, sitting in a prison cell, with 2 years to think about the 30-minute traffic stop that could have ended with a simple "Have a nice evening," but instead destroyed his life because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. Justice isn't always swift, but it is thorough. And sometimes, it comes wearing scrubs and a Navy uniform, speaking softly but carrying the kind of strength that can only be forged in the crucible of service to others. The truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how deeply it's buried under lies and assumptions. And in the end, we are all judged not by what we appear to be, but by who we choose to become. Friends, if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of dignity in the face of discrimination, if it inspired you to think differently about the assumptions we make about other people, then I invite you to join our community here at One Heart Stories. By subscribing to One Heart Stories, you're not just getting access to incredible content, you're becoming part of a movement toward greater understanding, compassion, and justice. You're joining thousands of people who believe that stories can change the world, one heart at a time. So please, hit that subscribe button right now. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective or inspire your next act of kindness. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be facing their own struggles with discrimination might benefit from examining their own assumptions about other people. Subscribe to One Heart Stories, where every story has the power to change a heart, and every heart has the power to change.